Hello, welcome back to the Goalkeeper.com podcast. And today we have a very special guest alongside our very own Dr. John Harrison, the data guru, the man with the facts, stats, and maths, as you all know. But with us today is also Paul Mathers, who is the Performance, Goalkeeping and Coach Education Manager at the Scottish FA. It's going to be a bit of a different episode today compared to ones we've done in the past around the World Cup, purely because we're not going to come at you with any massively pre-scripted segments, so to speak. But we'd rather kind of sit here and have a chat with Paul, just mainly around his role in the Scottish FA, the work they're going to be doing with Goalkeeper XG, our data and analytics consultancy in the coming weeks. And also just, I'm sure there'll be, several more things that will pop up of interest along the way over the course of the next half an hour or so. But John, first and foremost, how are you doing? It's good to see you again.
Yeah, good. Not bad at all. Getting very, very busy now. But being busy is a good thing. So no, I'm doing great.
Yeah, indeed. And Paul, I think the busyness is kind of replicated on your end. Am I right?
Yes, in this new role, it's been pretty challenging and hectic for the first 3 months. So hopefully I'm getting somewhere and getting dates in the calendar, etc. So hopefully it'll settle down soon.
Fantastic. And I think another thing to say just to everyone listening in or watching it is a Happy New Year, because obviously we haven't been with you since 2022, which now feels like a very, very long time ago. Maybe that's just how busy we all are. I think, John, the last time we would have put a podcast together would have been ahead of the World Cup final. Obviously we know the outcome of that game. First and foremost is the fairy tale ending to Messi's career. And likewise, the return of the Premier League season has given us a number of further talking points, and also a number of further talking points for Goalkeeper XG. And only the other day we saw David De Gea make that fantastic high diving catch. To which, just remind us, John, what was the kind of save probability on that off the top of your head?
So the save probability was quite high, around 90%, but the catch probability was only 12%. So while it was a sort of standard save you'd expect him to make, the majority of keepers are palming that out for a corner. So the Goalkeeper XG, we can look into the shot trajectory, the speed, all that kind of fun stuff. And we can evaluate individual moments like that, which maybe get overlooked by a lot of people because it was a routine save. But the fact he didn't parry it out for a corner, as we all know, corners result in goals about 4% of the time. It just meant Man United could go back on the attack rather than sitting back and potentially, obviously, conceding if the corner was of sufficient quality.
No, of course. And obviously last night in the Liverpool Real Madrid game, there was a couple of moments of madness from Alisson and Thibaut Courtois. It happens to the best of us. Entertaining game for the neutral nonetheless. But we'll get into a bit of that at a later date, not for today's episode, because today we want to talk about the Scottish FA, about Paul's role, and about kind of how Goalkeeper XG and the Scottish FA are collaborating to bring a new element of progression to the goalkeeping world, I'd say. But Paul, just to kind of get into it, tell us a bit about yourself, exactly what you do at the Scottish FA, a bit about your background coaching and why you're interested in working with Goalkeeper XG.
Well, I was a professional goalkeeper for 21 years. I've now been I was a full-time goalie coach, for 21. A kind of player and coach for my last 6-7 years of my career. I've been the goalkeeping coach at St Mirren and St Johnstone before joining the SFA in December of last year. I also, I probably have been a consultant or a part-time employee of the SFA for over 15 years in terms of helping deliver their coach education courses and also covering the national teams when my club commitments allowed it. So it's been something I've had a passion for, the coach education. And I just feel that with my background now of doing the groundwork on the training ground, it was a good opportunity to step into a new challenge. And basically, with my job, obviously, at the club level, I was keeping an eye on all the stats when you're recruiting goalkeepers, even your club goalkeepers, you're looking to see where they are in the tables. Sometimes you're going, that doesn't relate to what I'm seeing on a Saturday. So sometimes you're having to pick your goalkeeper up because he's at the bottom of the table, but the club may be doing well. But, the players now, they watch social media, they watch all the stats, etc. So it was really when I started seeing John's stuff that it kind of caught my eye to being something different.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting you bring up kind of that element of evolution. Obviously, goalkeeping. I mean, look, as we all know, goalkeepers being the main showpiece, the kind of focus point in many areas of football is often kind of falls by the wayside, and that's nothing new. But in terms of the statistical evolution in the game generally, we are seeing a relatively recent trend. I mean, in terms of your professional experience coaching at club level, Paul, when was the point at which you first saw, and obviously you kind of mentioned you've seen John's work in the last couple of years, but when was the point that you first saw data being used at a professional level within goalkeeping in the kind of spheres you were in?
I think in the last 6, 7, 8 years, we have looked at analysis in a different way through the coach education. The coach education, I went to Holland in 2013 with Frans Hoyk for a study group. And it was a real game changer in terms of reality-based training. So how you analyze things, and it kind of re-emphasized the SFA at that point. We were on that lines, and UEFA have kind of taken it on another step. And it was quite interesting when UEFA came to us that our actual course was probably about 75% of that UEFA course that they were intending rolling out. So when you start doing analysis, some of the tasks you get is how do you analyze the goalkeepers? And I think it was the revolution or evolution, however you call it. You started doing with the pen and paper, how much complete success with the goal kicks, how do you determine success? And that was a debate that probably went on for 2, 3, 4 years. And then I would say that since I've been at St Johnstone, so I'd probably say 4 or 5 years, I'm not very good with times, but that's when Y-Scout has really stepped up with things for me. But then again, it also creates debate. So I think it's been on the peripheral for probably since about 2012, 2013 in a certain way. And now when you relate it back to reality-based training, I think that they go hand in hand, to be honest, because it's what comes from the game. Yeah.
And I think, you mentioned Y-Scout interestingly there, Paul. Of course, this is something that we pick up on at Goalkeeper XG. It's kind of where some of those models don't pick up on the range of variables that come into the Goalkeeper XG formula, which of course gives that increased degree of accuracy. And the reason I put that forward is because I think, John, it'd be a good time for you to step in here. And for those of us listening who may not know too much about what Goalkeeper XG is and exactly what it does, feel free to give the 10-second pitch.
Yeah, cool. So no, basically Goalkeeper XG is all about bringing goalkeeper statistics sort of into the 21st century, I'd say. So as Paul mentioned there and Sam said as well, data in football, sort of that revolution started maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago, around that sort of time. But goalkeeping got left behind a little bit. So in terms of your Y-Scouts, your Optas, those sort of companies, they had loads of great stuff for outfielders and lots of great stuff for getting clips together and doing analysis like that. But as Paul mentioned, then when the goalkeepers got a hand of it and had a look at what they were putting out for there was a lot of debate because of a lot of the numbers and the formulas and the things they were using just didn't really line up with what we wanted and what we saw on the Saturday. So the interesting thing is, and what we've done at Goalkeeper XG is we've tried to build models from a goalkeeper first point of view and take into account every action they do on the pitch. So not just shot stopping, but also cross-claiming, sweeping, handling, distribution, the whole lot. And we basically tried to look at it from a probabilistic way. So what is the probability of a goal being scored before this action? And what is the probability of a goal being scored after this action? Because as Paul said, the things we actually want, we don't really care too much about describing what's happened. We want to know what we can do in the future to best give our goalkeeper the chance of not conceding a goal. So if we can look at lots of actions and see, doing this, making this decision actually increases the goal probability, whereas making this decision decreases it, we can then get on the training field, as Paul said, and then sit down and be like, okay, can we make drills and can we make session plans that are realistic and also affect the probability of the goal in a positive way for our goalkeeper? So make it easier for them. And then hopefully on the Saturday, they make those decisions and they can reap the rewards by saving more shots than we'd expect them to, or claiming more crosses, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you mentioned the kind of concept of debate. That's an interesting term I think has come up in the last couple of minutes on this chat, because obviously with goalkeepers, we see a range of opinions, some much more qualified than others, of course. I'm not mentioning any names, but Gary Neville. And nonetheless, it's interesting to see how, with yourself, Paul, obviously in a professional capacity, you are seeing that kind of evolution in your own role, obviously coming out of the club environment into the FA environment, to a larger extent. And likewise, there being a slight tweak in exactly where and what your attention is focused on. Of course, as you mentioned, just discussing before we came on today about kind of the title you've got and the role that you take on, it's quite broadly encompassing. And I suppose within that, you're going to be, made aware of, you're going to be exposed to, as I'm sure you have been over the entirety of your career, to lots of different ideas around goalkeeping. But what I'd like to ask you is just, with things like data coming into the picture, with goalkeeper XG coming into the picture, and of course we'll talk a bit more about exactly what goalkeeper XG are doing with Scottish FA in a couple of minutes' time. But what is it that kind of excites you most about about your own role in the Scottish FA at the moment, and what you're doing to kind of help further goalkeeping and goalkeeper coaches? Because I think, a big point to be made is that with data, with analytics, with everything in goalkeeping, there's a case for educating the goalkeeper to improve. There's also a case for educating the coach. And I suppose that's where you step in quite a large regard. So very long question, very short. What is it that really kind of excites you about your role and the kind of role that you're taking on at the moment at the Scottish FA?
I think going back to what I said, I've prided myself in being a coach educator for the SFA, and I've produced or helped produce quite a lot of the goalkeeping coaches, either through when they've been playing with me. I've encouraged them to go and do their coaching badges. So that gives you a bit of pride when they follow your pathway as such. And there's a few in the Premier League now that I had as goalkeepers at my club. And then because you encourage them and you speak to them, you get them involved. I've also got a passion for Scotland, so I want to try and produce the best goalkeepers. And I've always been the resources I've had at every club has always lent to me to be ahead, try and be ahead of the game. How do you do that? How do I match the big clubs who have got the resources with this? What can I do? And I've always been proactive and trying to keep up to date or ahead of things. And I think that's why I was so keen when I spotted John's stuff possibly 12 months ago to get involved with him. So I think that's why I want to do the role. I've got a passion for Scotland, I've got a passion for goalkeeping, and I've got a passion for helping goalkeeping coaches and goalkeepers improve and be better. So that just seemed a right fit for me at that time. As I said, I don't like talking about my own career, but I have been a Premier League goalkeeper coach for over 15 years. I've won 3 cups at provincial clubs, and I just felt as though I needed a new challenge and something bigger. And it just came along at the right time. So it's pure that passion between Scotland and goalkeeping.
No, fantastic. And it's funny because I think, we talk about this kind of bigger picture, and also just in a kind of professional sense, going on to something bigger, going on to a role that kind of encapsulates and interacting with a wide number of people from a wide number of coaching backgrounds potentially. We are genuinely seeing, I would argue, an evolution in goalkeeping, not only in what is available to goalkeepers and the kind of roles and positions they're playing on the pitch, but also in the attitudes towards goalkeepers, perhaps slowly, I would argue, within the kind of goalkeeping coaching spheres at the moment. Obviously, the media have not yet tagged on, unfortunately. But part of that is, people like the Scottish FA, or organisations like the Scottish FA, being willing to embrace and give some airtime to newer models. And that brings me on to exactly what, kind of what we're here for today, which is in part to talk a little bit about, Goalkeeper XG's first kind of live presentation as a formal organisation. Obviously, John has done stuff in the past at various conferences by himself, but with XG kind of coming into the frame very quickly as its own entity, it is going to be a milestone on March the 9th. So for those listening or watching, you may or may not have seen that on March the 9th, Goalkeeper XG will be delivering, and John will go into this slightly more in a second, a CPD night, a continuous professional development night with the Scottish FA. And for us at goalkeeper.com/goalkeeperxg, it's a milestone, isn't it, John?
Yeah, no, it's going to be wonderful. We're very grateful for the Scottish FA giving us this opportunity, and I think, like you say, it is. Hopefully, it won't just be a milestone for Goalkeeper XG, but also for goalkeeper coach education, and actually bringing a sort of data side to that. So, as a quick sort of rundown of the sort of things we'll discuss on the night, the first thing is going to be the pitfalls of goalkeeping data, because there is a lot of them. And as Paul mentioned earlier, like when Y-Scout Opta and stuff first came on the scene, they gave a list of metrics for goalkeepers, and I imagine a lot of them sparked debate. And I will be discussing those sort of metrics like clean sheets, goals conceded, pass completion, all that sort of stuff, cross-claim percentage, all that sort of thing, save percentage, because actually you need to be quite statistics literate to be aware of why some of the statistics can be misleading. So that the first thing I'll be discussing is just that, and hopefully give the coaches an understanding of, if someone comes to you with this number, these are the potential ways in which it could be biased. It could be okay, but you have to just be aware. And then also give them the idea of what sort of numbers and analysis they should be doing themselves if they want to remove some of those biases. So I think that will be the first big part, educating on what statistics are out there and how to understand them. And then the second two sections will be on using data to deliver optimal strategies. So the bit we'll concentrate on will be the 1v1 model that I've talked about on Twitter a lot, but I've got a full sort of educational course which I can go through with the people at the Scottish FA there. And that should be super fun. And it basically outlines what data can tell you about increasing goal probabilities and decreasing goal probabilities. Obviously, for goalkeepers, we want to aim to always decrease, but it's useful to know when they increase, because that's how we can be like, you probably rushed out a little bit too soon, or you held back way too deep there, you had to engage the ball, etc. So that'll be the second part. And the final section we'll touch on is probably what a lot of the coaches will be interested in terms of they're not quite sure how to do it, but how do we go from those statistics to actually on the pitch, on the grass, building session plans and designing sessions with the data in mind. So using the optimal strategies I discussed, but also stuff to do with, well, how many goal kicks is my keeper going to be expected to take per week? And therefore, how should I train that? How many crosses would you expect them to be claiming per game, etc., etc.? How many shots, that sort of stuff. So yeah, that's what we're gonna go for in this landmark CPD night with the Scottish FA. But hopefully this is the start of a relationship, and we can be delivering many more educational courses and bits and bobs throughout the next few years.
And Paul, I mean, I wanted to come to you and ask, how have you found the process of working with John, working with Goalkeeper XG so far? For those who may be out there wondering, what it's kind of all about and how the process works in going about actually starting to establish that relationship. From your perspective as the organisation, how's that been?
Yeah, the process has been great in terms of the communication, and the plannings went very smoothly so far. We've had probably 3 or 4 meetings on Teams, etc., just to discuss things. But I think the thing that's really hit me from the start was we are on the same wavelength, I think, a lot of the time, in terms of how we see how important this is and how much it can benefit the goalkeepers. I mean, if I go back a wee bit in terms of, I've obviously watched John's stuff on Twitter, and the thing that attracted me to it straight away was that I could tell as a goalie coach from the eye something went wrong there. And you can sometimes, when you're telling the goalkeepers that, you sometimes need video analysis, and they still doubt it. But when John started going into the detail of the percentages using this technique, that technique, from the distances, etc., it then kind of put into my head, that's the kind of thing that young goalkeepers especially will need in the future. So then my coach education head come on, and when I was doing my interview for actually the SFA job, John was probably involved in some of his stuff, because I was asked a question, where do you see the vision of coach education in 5 years' time? And it's hard to say how long, but my vision was that coach education had to improve. Session planning had to be into the fine detail. Goalkeeping coaches in Scotland, as I say, don't have the best resources, or most resources, should I say. So they need to get their knowledge better. Who can teach them to have better knowledge? That's where John's stuff for me came into the coach education side. And then when you take that onto the coach education side as well, when you're doing a session plan, the specific detail you can give a goalkeeper if you have the information from John's stuff in terms of percentages, techniques, areas of the pitch. And the final thing that really has always been the biggest thing for me as a club goalkeeping coach is, how do you compare the Scottish Premier League to the English Championship or England League One? And it's been the hardest thing to how you mix that together and get the right goalkeepers. So I think with that information, it definitely helps the goalkeepers coaches nowadays.
I'm just going to lead on from that and say, in terms of what you kind of picked up on just there from what Paul has said, John, in terms of that kind of comparison between leagues. It's something that we haven't touched on so much in the public domain in terms of our content around kind of quantitative comparisons between the worth of leagues and relative worths of goalkeepers, essentially. And we're not going to touch on that too much here, because obviously that is for those who would like to come and work with Goalkeeper. Actually, that's something nice in the background. But nonetheless, John, it's interesting that we, because we do have a lot of public facing stuff that goes out with XG, and I'll stress to everyone listening that what goes out is the same basis of stuff that is presented to professional clubs. So the insight that the audiences are getting, of course, it's not going to necessarily be personalized to the club in the same way it would be on a consultancy basis or what have you. And there's obvious kind of added advantages, a plethora of added advantages that come with working with us professionally. But my point is that the insight we're giving to the goalkeeping world generally it's not light, so to speak. It's not kind of it's not a cutaway of the main work we're doing. It's really is the kind of the flesh and bones in theory and in principle at the very least. And in terms of that content we're putting out, John, I think it'd be worth you explaining to some of our listeners and our audience and those who perhaps are reading articles on the website, as just before they listen to this or after they listen to this, why it is that we do publish what we do into the public domain and why we think that's important. But at the same time, what exactly people are seeing when they read these articles, in the sense of, we're breaking stuff down into often, situational analysis, so specific saves, but also trends over a longer period of time. Give us a bit of insight into that, into the content perspective from your eyes.
Yeah, so like you said at the start of your question, the most important thing for us, we're really passionate about education. And as Paul said at the start, making goalkeeper coaches as good as they can be and making goalkeepers as good as they can be. So that's why, like you said, we don't have like a Goalkeeper XG Lite or whatever. Like the stuff we put out is our full stuff. We obviously don't put out all the content that we could produce, and we do produce behind the scenes with clubs and FAs, etc. But the stuff we do put out when we do on socials is the best stuff we can, because we have a big passion for educating goalkeepers and goalkeeper coaches. And in terms of in terms of the education, I think it's a super important thing. Like Paul said, that is the way that goalkeeper coaches and goalkeeping is going. And I think everyone, like even 10, 20, 30 years ago, they knew that goalkeeping was a game of probabilities. They knew it was all about, most goalkeepers would be like, how can I make the finish as hard as possible for the striker? They might not say it in probability terms, but they would. That's what they do. That's why they'd position themselves down the line of the ball. That's why they'd sometimes rush out and try and smother the ball, etc. That's why they'd give themselves depth so they could maximize reaction time. And it's just translating that language of being hard to beat, which is literally, and staying big, which is literally in the parlance and has been for years, translating that into the mathematics and the statistics and trying to realize, okay, when should you do X, do Y, do Z? And if you do, what sort of benefits do you expect to get? So we will continue to put out free content, definitely. And we will also have some members only content on goalkeeper.com coming soon. But educating the public and educating goalkeepers throughout the world has always been a big passion of Goalkeeper XG, and it will continue to be so.
And of course, if you'd like to work with John on Goalkeeper XG, just email xg@goalkeeper.com. Give us a brief kind of situation that you and your organization are in, and we'll get back to you and organize a call and progress things onto the next stage. Coming away from that briefly, Paul, you used literally word by word, exactly one of the questions I was about to ask you, which was what are the Scottish FA's plans for Scottish goalkeeping over the next 5 years? So you alluded to like that kind of coming up in previous conversations you've had. Are you in a position to give us a kind of statement of intent, so to speak, as to what your plans are in your role over the next couple of years to take that goalkeeping at Scottish FA forward?
I'm trying to think of my 5-year vision now that I put on there. I've ticked one off with a CPD night. No, I think I'm a great believer in sharing. So I'm trying to get a culture where I've been around, I think, I've been around about 12, 14 club visits already, and tend to go and meet every goalkeeping coach or every full-time goalkeeping coach for a start, and just to ask them how I can help them and how they can help me. So the face-to-face discussions, building up a bank of goalkeeping coaches that care about Scotland. I'm not saying that none of them don't care, but the time constraints and commitments at football clubs are very large now. So there's a lot of things that you want to, that I need to try and get help with. Idea coaching, scouting, recruitment, just general things. So if I can get a bank of goalkeepers willing to share and commit to helping the Scottish FA, I think that's a good point to start with. And I think it's well known that our top goalkeepers at the moment are possibly in their late 30s or early 40s and are retiring or being injured. So I think you've got to try and look at future planning, how we can influence managers, I would say, more, because I'm a great believer in we do produce good goalkeepers in Scotland. And I will argue with that with anyone. We produce as good a goalkeeper as anyone till the age of 21. But because of the cutthroat nature of our Premier League and Championship and League One and League Two, managers are under so much pressure that they're very reluctant, or a lot of them are reluctant to give a young goalkeeper an opportunity. And that's what you need at 21, an opportunity.
Yeah.
So it's how we can change that over the next few years, I think, is going to be the biggest challenge. But we do need to, because I would love to be in a position of Republic Island at the moment who have got 4 goalkeepers under the age of 25 capped. I think England probably done it with Jordan Pickford as well, Sam Johnston, etc. So I think that's what one of my aims will be for Scotland is, can we get the young goalkeepers games, experience, and get them into the national team younger if possible?
I think what's really interesting from what you just mentioned, Paul, is the fact that, having that belief that a young goalkeeper is going to come in and benefit your side. Of course, there, as you mentioned, there are plenty of talented goalkeepers under 21 and over 21 in Scotland, but obviously there is, like you say, as with many countries and many leagues, a reluctance from a lot of managers to trust a kid, right, so to speak. And part of what Goalkeeper XG can do is obviously, as John will explain further in a second, is help give that security to matching a playing profile of a goalkeeper to the way a team wants to play. So in that vein, Paul, do you believe that with analytics, with data that's suggesting that goalkeepers are suited to play for a certain team, they could be trusted at younger age by managers?
I think that's hopefully the aim that we've all got to try and aim for. I think that I always say the first thing you've got to convince is a goalkeeping coach to be willing to fight his corner as such. So Going back to goalkeeping coaches need more information, more education, and they then need to sometimes fight that corner, especially for a football association, because at the end of the day, it is the club's players. So I think it's back to my old saying there, is that we've got to educate the goalkeeping coaches with as much as we can, and if the more help they can get, then hopefully the more they can fight the corner, and hopefully we can then get more younger goalkeepers playing through the manager, whether he trusts the goalkeeper because of the goalkeeping coach's information. Because I think the days are gone where, how did I get my opportunity? Got it through injury. But the numbers are so great now that some clubs carry 4 or 5 goalkeepers before they get to the 19-year-old. So that's hard. So they have to, the 19-year-olds need to be so much better now. So that's, how do you fast track them? Just through the information and the goalkeeping coaches, hopefully.
I mean, John, just following on from that, in terms of goalkeeper XG's capabilities and what we can provide in that kind of tactical and obviously firstly academy development, but also kind of scouting and recruitment. How is it the goalkeeper XG can actually complement a club's philosophy, their kind of original playing style, their original kind of approach from a managerial level or a club level, even downwards to the goalkeeping department? How can we go in there and actually support them to ensure that, or help them have the security and knowledge that they're making the right choices when it comes to bringing new goalkeepers into the setup?
Yeah, so I think there's 2 things here. So there's firstly having something that's sort of impartial, like the statistics are not going to care about if someone's got a specific opinion about a player or whatever. It's just going to tell you the sort of the cold hard truth, I guess, in terms of how they're performing in the various aspects of the game. So it's going to tell you if, they're a great shot stopper, but they really struggle at judging through balls for sweeping and they often come out too far and get rounded, etc., whatever it might be. So I think having something like that allows the goalkeeper coach to be more relaxed, because for me, if they can provide some sort of statistical package and say, we think this 19-year-old's ready, this is how he's playing in the 21s, blah, 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 this is his performance levels, then if he did come to the first team and make mistakes, like that hasn't changed how he's played for the 21s, and that shouldn't affect his sort of judgment in the club. The club then shouldn't damn him because of what's happened there, because clearly he was backing it up on evidence the way he played at the younger age levels. So I think it's a great thing to have a sort of impartial person rather than just, you'll need a goalkeeper coach fighting your corner, but it will help to have something impartial that's not to do with them. And then the second point is, like you said, we've got a model called our goalkeeper suitability profile, which looks at the exact type of events a club gives to their goalkeeper. So a club like Man City, for example, Ederson will only face around 2 shots on target on average per game, but will have to do about 40 distributions and will probably face around 10 crosses into the box and 5 through balls behind the defence. Whereas another goalkeeper might only have to do 12 goal kicks. That's it, the whole game. They don't use him in build up, and has to face about 8 shots on target a game and 20 crosses into the box or something like that. And so the skill set that one goalkeeper needs to have to be successful is very different to the other. For the Man City style goalkeeper, you don't need to be an amazing shot stopper, but if you aren't really confident with the ball at your feet and really good at coming out under pressure to claim crosses and through balls, you're going to struggle. So what we can easily do at Goalkeeper XG is use that to adjust, are our academy goalkeepers playing in the style of our first team? And if they aren't, how would we expect them to go into the first team? So it's one of those situations, depending on managerial changes and stuff at football clubs, you can't always have the Barcelona La Masia style of having your under sixes try and play the same as your first team. At clubs in England and Scotland, that's not always going to be the case. So a useful thing to be able to do is be like, well, the academy's playing like this and our goalkeeper's got these stats, but the first team plays slightly differently, whatever it may be, but we can actually modify the stats and predict how they'll do in the first team based on the different situations they'll face, which they might not face at academy level as often.
It's interesting that we come on to this point very briefly before we finish off of how, let me phrase it this way. Goalkeepers are going to make mistakes. Goalkeepers may come into a new environment and they may underperform. That's not a failing of the data. But what we're saying here is there's a case for having the long-term approach. And we're not saying a long-term approach even has to be 2, 3, 4, 5 years. We're not under any illusions. None of us here are that long-term plans at football club often are not very long. And in many cases are not given the chance to materialize. But if it's the case that we're providing that security, John, to come in and say, well, even if a mistake does happen, obviously that is unforeseen. That there's no data in the world that can say a goalkeeper is never going to make a mistake. But what it does give is that assurance that you have still made the right decision. You should stick with it. And of course, if you begin to see wider trends over 10 games, 15 games, 20 games, things are going wrong, again, the models can account for that and ensure that stuff is being adjusted in training or in the kind of demands placed upon the goalkeeper or the way the goalkeeper is reacting to those demands. It's a constantly evolutionary process, and it just looks at that longer. Well, I use the word long term, the phrase long term, tongue in cheek. But we're even talking about over the case of 6 weeks of the season. We're even talking about the case of 4 or 5 games. 4 or 5 games in any league can make or break the team's season. And identifying those trends early can only happen if you have that originally founded outline of what's been happening before, and then you have a basis to work off. And I think it's really important to put that forward to those who perhaps are a bit skeptical of the data and using data in goalkeeping, because as we say, and as we've recognised here, John, there is a case that yes, a goalkeeper can make a mistake. A goalkeeper can come in and he may take a slightly longer to adjust, mentally more than anything else to being in a new environment. But ultimately, it just doesn't change the basis that the club, based on the most factual and secure provision they have to make their decisions, will have made the right decision if following that kind of quantitative basis. Gentlemen, we're coming towards the end of the podcast today. Just before we kind of go away and leave Paul to the million and one things I'm sure he's got to do and the million and one things that we've all got to do before we kind of link back up on the 9th Hampden Park. If you could just give a little bit of information, Paul, on how coaches can sign up to come to the event, how they can, I'm not going to say let us know where the nearest bus stop is to Hampden Park, but any kind of information could be useful in terms of coaches that are looking to come to the event on the 9th, if that'd be great if you give a bit of information.
Yeah, it's been greatly received from a lot of coaches, and we've got chief executives, we've got managers coming, we've got outfield coaches, goalkeeping coaches, loans managers. So we've got a real mix of people attending. So anybody that wants to attend really just has to have a Scottish Live account with an ID number. Once they get an ID number, then they can register for the CPD night on the 9th of March. So if they don't have a Scottish Live ID number, then that's what they have to do, and then to just enroll and register into the night. But as I say, numbers are going well, and I'm sure come the evening it will be a great evening of debate, discussion, and hopefully, I'm sure everybody will learn something on the evening. That's for sure.
And just a couple of updates in terms of what we're doing on our end at goalkeeper.com. If you want to find out more in terms of times and things like that of the event itself on the 9th, please head over to the goalkeeper.com website. On the editorial page, there is a article that outlines exactly what's going on and how, when you need to be there. Of course, we all don't want to miss any of John's soothing voice and also his presentation. Aside from that, we also have, of course, the month of glove continuing for goalkeeper.com. This is the first time that we will have spoken to you via audio medium or video medium about what's been happening in terms of our kind of internal progressions on the goalkeeper.com marketplace and also the goalkeeper.com lifetime membership program. If you are a brand, a glove brand, you'd like to come and have a discussion about selling your products on goalkeeper.com, please email brands@goalkeeper.com and we'll get back to you and organize a call ASAP. If you're anyone else in the goalkeeping world that may be interested or thinks they can contribute something positive to the conversation around goalkeeper.com and what we're trying to do, or indeed Goalkeeper XG, please reach out via admin@goalkeeper.com. And of course, if you'd like to sign up to our newsletter to get emails that you'd actually want to read, please head over to the latest article, any of the latest articles on our website, and there'll be a form embedded in those articles. But that just leaves me to say thank you, Paul, very much for your time, for coming on, and we look forward to seeing you again on the 9th. There will be snippets and stuff of the event coming out in the kind of following days and weeks afterwards on social media and whatnot. And if you can't make it, there'll be plenty more events and the like and content coming out that John will be producing to give more insight into how goalkeeping is being progressed into the future. So that's me. That's John and Paul with Glove. That's goalkeeper.com. See you next time.